This is the first of the series lectures that we do in the second term. There are a number of people that are going to be coming and visiting us from various places, including design agencies or organizations that talk about creativity, or individuals that they have an interest overall in the creative aspects of the communication, how we bring people together, how we bridging cultures. Teresa will talk to you about tonight. So Teresa is opening the series tonight for one of the 11 this term talks we're gonna have until the end of April. And she's a senior digital designer at the Design It. If you don't know Design It, she will tell us a bit more about this, one of the Google's companies. So she's based in London. Her background is in interface and digital design, visual identity. So she's been working in a variety of brands and a number of digital products. It is very interesting because we've been talking a lot about cultural identity, diversity, inclusion in communication, etc. So it's great to see a Portuguese. Okay, I'm sure that Eduardo will be happy about it.
He's already looked it up.
So to see a Portuguese that worked in Lisbon, in Amsterdam, in San Francisco, now in London, but also in Rwanda in Africa, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about it. Yeah, and I'm sure you're gonna say things tonight. So she's been working and helping SMEs for, you know what SME is? Yeah, small companies, yeah. So through different design disciplines, and she was working in partnership with this East Africa investment. That sounds exciting, okay? However, the exciting part for me, for myself, and I bet it's for you, is that how one person can bring all this kind of knowledge under creativity, under digital design. And Teresa, thank you very much for coming tonight. And the stage is yours. I'm going to move out from here. Make sure that you stand here.
Yep.
This is what Luca wants you to not move from here.
I'll try.
Thank you.
All right, hi everyone. Thanks for having me here, and thank you, Anastasis, for the opportunity. My name is Teresa. I'm a senior designer at a global design company called Design It, as Anastasis was saying. Basically, what Design It does is we merge different disciplines, very much focused on service design, business design, and then UX and UI. And we have a human approach to design what matters. That's our motto. So we do all kinds of projects, from future vision type of projects where the concept is more important than the execution, to production work, the design ready kind of work. So I'm a senior designer. My background is product and graphic design, so I was also a student once. I started working in advertising, doing mainly brand activation, a lot of social media campaigns, and then in parallel I was freelancing, doing some branding and identity for some small studios in Lisbon. Then moved to Amsterdam and started specializing in UX and UI. Started working for product design companies and strategic design, and now I'm a designer, where I had this opportunity to be part of this project that I'm going to talk about last year. So I'm going to talk about the importance of building client trust across cultures. This is my Twitter handle, @Mira_Teresa, by the way, in case you guys want to follow or tweet about this talk, and you can use the Design Roast hashtag. So let's get started. During the month of July last year, I was part of this project that happened in Rwanda for a month. And this was a partnership between Design It and the East Africa Investments. So we were 4 designers from the London office sent to Africa for a month to help 4 young entrepreneurs grow their businesses through different design disciplines. Service design, UI, UX, research. We were split in teams of 2, and each one of us had 2 businesses to look after. And it was also our responsibility to prepare the whole experience a few weeks earlier. So we interviewed a few people that lived or worked in Africa to learn from their experience and advice. We prepared a toolkit with some methods and tools for ideation or to assess ideas quickly when you're on the ground. And in Africa, you don't have access to books or kind of documentation we have here. We also got in touch with the entrepreneurs beforehand. And of course, we tried to read as much as possible about the Rwandan culture. Regarding the East Africa investments, they provide supportive capital to small and medium businesses in Africa. So they're not a charity. They invest in the ones they think are solid enough or have great potential to grow sustainably. So our focus was on creating measurable business impact, the output of our work. So looking at profitability over the philanthropic side of things. Because SMEs, they're really important for the Rwandan culture, which is growing really fast at the moment. So their goal is to help these businesses grow, give them the skills and the ammunition to create employment, as opposed to just giving them money, which is not a long-term solution. So the 2 businesses I was working for were an international Montessori school for middle-class Rwandan families and some expats, from daycare to primary level, and a healthy fast food restaurant, also venue for some events. In this case, I'm showing at the bottom on the right a film screening, both located in Kigali. Regarding the school, is anyone familiar with the Montessori philosophy here? Anyone has heard about? So Montessori is an education method created by Maria Montessori, where there's a big emphasis in the artistic side of a child. So for instance, if a kid has a special interest or talent for music, the teacher will nurture that, looking at individual needs. The classroom setup is also different than what we are used to. Instead of having the children sitting like you guys facing the teacher, in this case it's me, you have the teacher sitting next to them. So they're all at the same level. There's not a lot of hierarchy. The classes are also mixed age, which means the younger ones get to learn from the old ones, but also the old kids learn the responsibility of taking care of each other. And learning is based on the physical exploration of the environment and materials rather than just learning from worksheets. So for the school, Liz, which is the owner in the picture, she needed some help with some marketing materials. She needed a new website. She needed some help improving the parents' experience, but also on the organizational side of the school. Things like staff management and internal processes. So she was spending too much time giving the classes herself and doing admin work when she needed to focus on improving the curriculum or training the teachers and just running her business. In terms of the restaurant, Malik, which is the owner of the restaurant, he wanted it to be more about the experience rather than just the food, rather than just a place you go to eat. And initially the briefing we received highlighted 3 needs. One was improving pop-up opportunities, the second one was a new packaging, food packaging, and the third one was improvements in the stock management. So from how to store the food in the physical space to how to keep track of monthly and weekly orders. But as soon as we got there, we realized that they had a lot more problems than these ones, so this was just the tip of the iceberg. For example, he had to improve the overall quality of the service. They didn't have a POS system to register expenses and income, which is the basic of a business, which are financials. Now, I'm not going to go into detail regarding the work we did because that's a different talk, but just to give you a bit of context, while working closely with our clients, I realized that my design process and business interactions needed to be based on trust, because the way they do business is very different than what I was used to. So we had to use our consultancy skills, but also be on the ground, be very hands-on, do a lot of production work to make things happen. And especially because of cultural differences, the soft skills were really important. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Developing countries, by default, lack a system or a reliable structure that promotes trust. The way they build relationships is by nature very different. Rwandans are quite reserved if we compare them to other countries in Africa like Kenya. But they may ask you some personal questions about your life or family to learn a bit more about who you are and to connect. Questions like, are you married, or do you have brothers and sisters, which are completely unusual in the business context in London. And the Rwandan culture really values some practices and rituals that demonstrate respect, and the genocide is still very present in the way they live. And it's actually quite a sensitive subject. So understanding their culture, observing their habits closely to get immersed in their world is super valuable, because when you do that, you leave behind old ways of thinking or limiting ways of thinking, which in turn unlocks fresh ideas. During the first days in Kigali, we had classes of Kinyarwanda to learn the basic words. We had a tour to explore the city, the real city. We had lunch with the locals, and each one of us stayed throughout the whole month with a different Rwandan family, so we had the full experience. Fun fact, they have this thing called milk bar, where they go to drink milk, and it's served warm, so that was quite interesting. We definitely had the full experience. And we learned things like you're not supposed to eat or smoke in public. Rwandans are quite conservative in terms of clothing for business context, which is something we didn't expect. There is not a lot of freedom to talk about the government or to criticize it. So normally people don't have an opinion about the government, at least in public. If someone invites you, or if you suggest going out for lunch or dinner, you're expected to pay for it. It's really a golden rule. The same way it's considered rude to complain or say that you're hungry or tired. It's forbidden by the government for kids to ask for money in the streets. So if you see that happening, you're supposed to ignore it. And overall, there's a big sense of community. Family is their top priority, as opposed to our society where we tend to be a bit more individualistic. We invest a lot in career and success. So why did I choose to talk about trust? Because design is about relationships. Design is about a two-way conversation, and it does more than just solving a problem. So to make real impact, we must keep the people we're designing for at the center of our work and reasoning. So we need a human approach to problem solving, because design has the power to inspire people and empower individuals. It's not just about the design problem you're trying to solve, the product. It's about the outcomes. And trust is the main component of any relationship, and it's the driver of most of our decisions. We connect with people we trust, we pay for a service or a product because we trust its quality or the brand's values. We follow a leader because we believe in his words and behaviors, and people fight when their trust is broken. So when people trust you, they're more likely to listen to you, they get involved in the process, and they're more likely to help you, to be willing to help. So how might we instill trust in the design process to drive positive change in the places that need it the most? While I was reflecting back on my experience designing in Rwanda, I took note of a few things that I've learned on how to create a relationship of trust to make lasting impact. And I would say this is valid to any country. So these are also lessons I've been applying to my everyday job. The first one is about being reliable and transparent. It's about saying exactly what you think. So favor the explicit over the implicit, because it just makes everything easier to understand. And it's the only way to achieve long-term results. It's when you have transparent approach to collaboration. So for example, in Africa, sense of time is very different than our sense of time here. It doesn't mean the same to them. The pace is much slower. It's normal or even expected to arrive late in meetings or to take a long time to answer to emails. So from the beginning, we had to be very honest with our entrepreneurs about the type of commitment we needed from them. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to achieve results in a month. We also told Malik that some of the issues we identified in his business were far more important than designing a new packaging, for example. And this helped him to gain financial awareness, to understand how important it is to keep track of your financials and document that. Another way to build trust is through consistency and work ethic, so being reliable. Always show up on time, deliver what you said you will deliver. So if you could do only one thing, I would say keep your promises always. Teach your client how to fish. They say, give a man a fish and you will only feed him for a day, because you're not giving him the tools to do it himself. So ongoing coaching and mentorship are the best thing you can leave behind, especially in this context. And that kind of support can be really inspiring for them. When you share methodologies and tools, you're giving them a framework. And you give them the possibility or the autonomy to apply design thinking to their everyday problems as well. And it also helps with instilling critical thinking, which is something they don't practice a lot, and this is a result of their education system. One of the tools we shared with our entrepreneurs was, on the left, an impact effort matrix to prioritize what were the things we really needed to address, but also what were the things with higher impacts that required less effort. And doing this kind of exercise with them has a very different result than doing it on our own and then just presenting it back. The second thing we did with Lise was a journey map to visualize all the different moments during a year at the school, from the initial point of contact from prospect parents and how they find out about the school, to the moment where they enroll their kids, business as usual, till the end of the school year. And this helped to create insights, right? Because we provided Lise with the big picture of her own business. And we also shared these and other exercises on a digital version, so they could keep on using it and adapt in other situations. One of the deliverables for the school was a marketing strategy document on the top left, with some guidelines around their audience, the type of content they should share, tone of voice, the frequency, some tips, for example, on how to craft posts for Facebook without having to create content from scratch, days and time in a week with higher engagement rates. Another one was a step-by-step guide from Squarespace, which is the platform I used to build the sites while I was there for the school. And this gives them the possibility to update content themselves, to be autonomous. For example, the fees that change every year. So we make it possible for them to maintain the site without being dependent on us. We also provided Malik with some guidelines around health and safety, stock management, and staff management. And some of them were for him, for example, how to keep your staff motivated, or how to run performance reviews in the team. But the majority of them were for the employees, so we made it in a way that they could print and have each page in the kitchen area, next to the fridge or next to the washing area, food preparation. So it's something we left behind that is not static, so it will continue to impact the way they work every day. Walk a mile in their shoes, which is about empathy. It's about the ability to put yourself in other people's shoes and solve the problem from their perspective, understanding their experience, their struggles, their thought process. And this helps to be more effective and to speak the same language as your clients. But most of all, I would recommend avoiding making assumptions or generalizing, which is something it's a tendency we all have, because needs and desires, they're different from country to country. The first thing we did after we met Liz was to immerse ourselves in the school routines. So observing how the teachers were working with the children, but also the relationship between staff members, how were the parents received, and what was Liz doing. We interviewed a few parents and also asked a few questions to the staff, but also had some informal chats over lunch to learn a bit more about them and to understand what are their motivations, for example, not just as professionals, but also as humans. And this is the only way you really get to learn about your clients' values, things that are not in the book, right? And it helps with communication barriers and making them feel understood. The same with the restaurant. We visited the 2 locations Malik has. We ordered some different meals from the menu. We observed how the staff was working and had some informal chats with him. We found out that he had a full-time job apart from being an entrepreneur. It's quite common in Africa. And through these chats, we also learn a lot about Rwandan culture. So, for example, weddings are big events in Africa with hundreds of people and a huge financial investment. Or other cultural insights like how do they use social media and WhatsApp. They use it in a very different way than we do. They use WhatsApp for advertising. There are lots of groups for businesses, for neighborhoods, for example, moms or expats in Kigali, and people join them just as we join a Facebook group without necessarily knowing the other members. Another exercise that is commonly used in workshops is called an empathy map. And it aims at hearing from your target audience what are their goals and fears to consider their emotions. So we give them the chance to tell us what do they see, what do they think about a particular product or service, what do they say when they communicate about it, and what do they hear from other people, from their friends, their colleagues. And this helps to understand what are the pain points, but also how they feel about it. And it's first-hand information, so you should base your design decisions from this kind of source. Foster a co-creation environment. It's about bringing your client along with you in the design process. It's about creating this, promoting this co-creation mentality. And this is done by reflecting upon things together, making them part of the decision making, and taking their ideas and concerns on board. So it's about choosing to be curious instead of an expert, asking questions you don't have the answers for, or just being humble, because big ideas are normally built from many smaller ones. And we did a co-creation workshop with Malik. We wanted to ideate around some interesting challenges and opportunities for his business, but mostly we wanted to hear from him. What were the ones he was really interested in, or was he concerned about something? So the way we did it was we listed all the things we knew or suspected about the business, so the facts. And then we asked a few questions and took note of the feedback to validate our assumptions. And then we asked him to vote in the ones he wanted to discuss or brainstorm. And then diverge and converge to select ideas, always encouraging questions like, why do we want to do this? Or what's stopping us? And the same with the website for Liz for the school. I spent a whole day with her wireframing for the site, discussing the information architecture, because I wanted to understand from her what was the message she wanted to communicate to parents, or how much information about Montessori she wanted to have on the website, or even in terms of visual language or functionality. For example, she wanted to have this family feel, so putting the emphasis on photography and showing the kids in action, or adding testimonials from other parents to build credibility was really important. So you should always learn enough about a project to understand that you don't know everything about it, knowing when you should listen to your clients. Show vulnerability, because we're all humans and we don't have the answers for everything, right? So being very honest with your client if you don't have a solution for a problem immediately, or verbalizing your concerns, it may sound insignificant, but it is symbolic. And this is when you get the best feedback and when there is a genuine discussion and dialogue going on. So sharing your worries with the client helps to build rapport, helps them to relate to you and just see you as a human, just like them. Also things like spending time with the entrepreneurs outside of work to build the relationship on a personal level, or interacting with the kids while at the school like the teachers do, or helping Liz and the staff feeling more comfortable in front of the camera when we were taking pictures for the site, or even telling them that I don't feel comfortable in front of a camera either. But most of all, realizing that you also have a lot to learn from them. Embrace uncertainty, because unexpected challenges are also a good base on which to build trust, and they keep you on your toes, so you're forced to improvise and adapt quickly. Especially in Africa, I can tell you there are a lot of things you can't control and things you don't expect, like connectivity. Internet connection was the biggest challenge. I was building the website using Squarespace. So you can imagine how terrible it was to upload an image in every 5 minutes trying to refresh the page with the slowest internet ever. But constraints can also push creativity. And this means adopting an iterative process where thinking is done by making. So while I was building the site, we realized we wouldn't have enough time to incorporate all the features we wanted. So I had to create an MVP plan, right? But also being smart and creative about the way I was uploading content to be more efficient. And this is the fun part, because if we had the answers when we started, we wouldn't really learn anything, right? So you shouldn't take things for granted. Another thing I learned to embrace was to be patient when things take longer than expected and you don't see a lot of progress, because their sense of time is just different. And one way to mitigate that was to be on site as much as possible to make things happen quicker, get them to answer the questions we needed to move forward instead of waiting on an email, or giving them a daily to-do list as a friendly reminder. And this brings me to another challenge that I had to embrace, which was the fact that we didn't really have a proper space or a desk to work in Africa. And internet wasn't that great, internet at home. I had to constantly top up my phone and pair it with my laptop to be able to work. So I ended up finding this co-working space where I rented a desk for 2 weeks. And because of that, I ended up meeting quite a few interesting people. Some of them designers, other people with completely different backgrounds, but all in the same situation. So we were mainly foreigners working in Rwanda temporarily, each one with a different story. So if I had good internet at the school or at home, I wouldn't have met as many people. So my experience wouldn't have been that interesting. And because this happens, it also helped Liz to trust us and to trust that the site was going to be done, because we quickly found a solution instead of finding an excuse not to do it. Define success and commit to it. It's important to define what success looks like to you and your client. And this is the difference between designing a product or designing outcomes. Because if you have a clear picture of what design or success, means to them and their businesses, you're more likely to achieve tangible results. So managing and meeting your client's expectations is extremely important. I learned that we had to be very clear about what we could deliver in a month, but also what we couldn't deliver and how they could help us, what was expected from them. And right at the beginning, we delivered this scope canvas to define what was the problem statement, what was our proposed solution, what was the expected outcome, and what was the output we were committing to, so the actual deliverables. But also, what was out of scope and how could we ensure sustainability? How could we ensure that they would keep doing the work we started after we left? For example, with handover documents or the marketing strategy guidelines, explaining to them how to do it. So it's always better to under-promise and over-deliver, because anything extra is always a surprise. And always produce quality work. So in this context, trust really becomes the driver for positive change. Working in developing countries gives you the chance to be part of meaningful projects that tap into real needs. It also helps you to understand and learn from the people you're designing for, because they're the ones facing the problems you want to solve. And that's why being on the ground is so important, because designing in Africa has different challenges than the ones we are used to here in the city. And it requires an awareness of subtle details that you wouldn't notice otherwise. So building trust should be embedded in the design process. And because we created a strong relationship with our entrepreneurs, we were able to achieve tangible results in 1 month. 1 week after we were back in London, Lee sent us a message saying that 10 new families enrolled in the school. And this represents around 30% of the total number of children they have, so it's quite a big percentage. And they found out about the school via WhatsApp with some digital materials we created for social media. The school now is also operating with a more professional approach, because we helped Lise define the roles and responsibilities for each member of her team, which means she can now delegate and focus on other activities. The same for the rest of it. We improved the internal processes by introducing the standards I show you guys and the guidelines, which in turn helps to improve the customer experience, so brand image. So as a recap, the keywords for trust are transparency, ongoing support through mentorship, empathy, collaboration, showing vulnerability, resilience, and commitment. And trust is about doing what you say you will do. So again, if I could give you one piece of advice, I would say always keep your promises. Right. If you're interested in learning more about designing in developing countries, I have a few recommendations. I'll share this list with Anastasia, so no need to take notes. First thing is IDEO's Guide to Human-Centered Design. You can download the free version of the PDF on their website. They have some useful exercises and detailed case studies explaining how they've done it. Also IDEO.org, which is a non-profit organization to help alleviate poverty. They have their design kit section with some interesting resources. Stanford Design School, they also have available free toolkits on design thinking, a lot of exercises from brainstorming, facilitation to prototyping, so you may be interested in that. The IGA Design for Good page, they have an interesting list of organizations that sponsor this kind of initiative and how you guys can get involved. And Design That Matters, which is another non-profit. It's basically a lot of designers and engineers that also design for the poor countries, and they specialize in newborn medical equipment. It's quite interesting. So I'll share the list afterwards. And with this, I'll leave you for questions. Thanks.
You know what is happening in design these days, right? Design is changing overall in a way that I talk a lot to students in general about that design is not Photoshop. Design is not software. Design is it's a bigger idea. So the question is why we should engage, or why we should go to the university to learn about design. And what you just said today about understanding people, understanding their values, their ethos, their daily life, and walk in their shoes, as you said, it's very important because we can understand more and we can communicate more to them. So from your experience as a digital designer, how that changed the way you see things? Like you had like some experience before you go to Rwanda and talk to these people. How this experience changed the way you are approaching design afterwards?
I think I became a better observer and more aware of the importance of really observing people's habits closely, especially if you're designing something for a user. You really need to almost wear the skin of that user. And normally research, so there's contextual research which is done in context, right? But there's the normal research, normally done in offices and labs. But that's not the real world. That's not how things happen. So I think this experience really helped me be a better observer. Just take into consideration all the nuances and all the little details that really contribute to a good idea, I think.
In general, we're talking about diversity and inclusivity by design, which is a matter that with the globalization and the social media, we should think a bit more because we're closer to the Rwanda people, let's say, for example, than ever before. Yeah. So with the click of the button, we can communicate with the people. We can communicate our desires, etc., and influence people. So, where do you think is going? Where do you think that our design approach would be, or how our design approach will be formed in the next 30, 40, 50, 100 years from now, with all this kind of technology? You talk about the internet. You're talking about like what the internet can offer to us, or what cannot, or can take away from us. Because you said that even if I had internet, fast connection, I would have stayed home, or and I wouldn't have met all these nice people. So where do you think it's gonna go?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. So
What did you say? No one of us is gonna be alive in 100 years' time. So
it doesn't matter what I say because. So I think in terms of visual design and UI, for example, user interface, I've actually been interested in reading a little bit about it because it seems like my role is going to disappear at some point, so I better learn something new. I think interfaces won't be, very soon, they won't be as we know them at the moment. There won't be screens, or it's going to be all in the air. And we will probably in a few years create our own content with just a thought or the speed of light. There won't be the need to go and use a platform called Squarespace to build a website. Yeah, maybe things are going to be that seamless in the future.
how much we're going to get? How much we're going to get involved with people, with cultures? Do you
Way
think?
more, I hope.
Okay.
I think cultures will start to be diluted because we're so much closer and closer and closer. The boundaries are getting blurred. It's so easy to travel these days. It's so easy from your home to talk to anyone in the world, to reach people that you wouldn't even thought a few years ago, people that you admire, for example. So I think those boundaries are going to be really blurred.
You think that, I believe that in general, I agree with you, I will 100% agree with you, because you are in a room now with people from various places all over the world, and they have a common objective, they have a common goal to learn about, mainly to learn about design and communication. So I see that we're going to be blurred with people. So how that our approach, what we need to take into account, because when it comes to this kind of blur approach, like we bring people from different cultures, diversity backgrounds, we might be not considering certain values or certain ethical kind of backgrounds. What would you take into account? What do you think?
So there's precisely the risk.
I'm
of,
just trying to use the right language now. I don't want to say something,
No, I agree. I think there's the risk of losing the differences, which are so important because we are all differences, right? And maybe you were asking what we should take into account. Maybe we should try and preserve our identities a bit more, be more protective regarding our own identities, who we are.
Okay.
And this is valid for designing products as well.
Do we have any questions from? Yes, Tommy.
How did that relationship continue once you went back into the Western world?
So we're still in touch with them. Our official help stopped, but we are still in touch because the whole point of this experience was to keep on helping them, the ongoing support and mentorship I was talking about. And this was done through Design It for the first months after we came back. And now it's a little bit our responsibility, but mostly, so they have people in this partnership or in this program, so going there quite frequently, and it's actually going to be happening more often at Design It. So the work we initiated will be continued by someone else, but till then we're still in touch with them.
There's a great number of students in the group here where they have an interest in design thinking overall and the way we are getting engaged with the society. In designing, is it space for students to get involved, to participate in programs like this, or to volunteer for projects?
I think that's a question. I probably don't have the answer for that. It's a question of getting in touch. At the moment, because the London studio is quite new, we don't really have, for example, internships programs at the moment. We don't have junior designers because the team is small and we're still trying to build the studio. And London is quite a big market. But I believe, because I know in other studios around the world, we do have interns and we do have different programs for students. I believe that will happen soon, I hope, in London.
Do you have any other question? Luca and then.
Yeah, so first of all, great talk. What I wanted to ask is, you said you've done product design and graphic design in university, you studied that. But then again, the whole presentation was about, apart from that, about entrepreneurship and SEO marketing and social and digital marketing and stuff like that. So I wanted to ask, how did you get to learn that, and then how did you manage to work on that in the market? Because I guess it was kind of out of your comfort zone initially.
Totally.
Yeah.
This was out of my comfort zone, was a bit out of my skill set in general. For all of us, the four of us, because, for example, for the restaurant, for Malik, we needed business design skills that we didn't really have. And this project in Rwanda was mostly about service design, so it's not even pure visual design or UX. So we kind of had to blend all our skills. We had some support from people from the London studio. We had to do a little bit of everything. I was doing research, I was facilitating the workshop, but at the same time designing the website. Now, your second question, how did I learn this? I'm still learning every day. I started working in advertising, as I told you guys, and then started doing a bit more of user interface. But I was always curious about learning more and writing and presenting. I wanted to do more of that, be a well-rounded designer. And when I joined Design It a year and a half ago, almost a year and a half, one of the reasons I joined was also because I knew they were very into business design and service design, which were skills that I didn't have and knowledge that I didn't have. So we have internal training for workshop facilitation, for example, so I've been learning that.
Mine was it seems very interesting to me personally, because it's not you're very hands-on. I really like that aspect of it, which a lot of the design things I was looking at are very much you're in a restricted space, so the studio space in constantly. And I feel like it'd be a bit repetitive, so I was just wondering how much do you actually leave the office in the sense of actually going to all these different places? Because I think nowadays a lot of people, I like ringing people, which is a bit old fashioned because all my friends are like just messaging each other and don't actually like speaking. So it's like to be able to actually go and meet a client and actually work with them rather than just an email or a text or something is far more interesting to me than just the mundane stuff that seems to be about.
Yeah.
I will build something that you can
Yeah, of
reflect on
course.
that. I think that there's a trend in a way, and I was discussing this earlier today, that young people hiding behind a portable screen in general. And it's very difficult for them to establish this kind of communication things. We do that sometimes, right? So we're going to bed, we have our partner next to us, and then we just text someone while people or reply to messages or we're on Facebook. So that, I think that comment goes back to the idea of going to the spaces that you said that you went to this kind of rented desk. So maybe you want to say something about it.
Yeah. So renting a desk was quite interesting because precisely because I wasn't working in isolation at home, or it wasn't a solitary thing where you go to the fridge every 10 minutes. I was actually interacting with people, or it was also really good to concentrate because everyone is there to do the same thing, to really work and focus. You're paying for the desk, right?
Yeah.
So that was really interesting just to hear about the stories. I remember I had a girl sitting next to me, I'm not sure if I told you about it, that had a startup. She was so young, but so inspiring, the whole story. She was trying to build a startup and asking me some questions and advice, when I also needed some advice. So that was interesting, but to your question, I go a lot to client side. Now at Design It, yes, because it's more a consultancy. So there are different spheres within design, right? You may end up working in a small studio or a boutique where it's more about, I don't know, you can do more branding or more production or be more on your computer. But also, as you progress in your career or as you become a bit more senior, the tendency is to be less hands-on and maybe be more on site with the client, especially if you are on a consultancy kind of company. That's what I do a lot now. I go to the client's offices sometimes I need to go 3 times a week or 4 times a week if I'm assigned to a project. There are other periods when I'm in the studio, still working with the client or having conference calls. So it's a little bit of everything. It depends on what you feel more comfortable with and what you want, really. Some people like to be with their headphones for the whole day. Other people like to interact.
It's just, I worked with clients before, and when you're doing that process via email, like you say, like that month activity you did wouldn't have been feasible if you were just emailing constantly.
Totally.
Whereas when I was with clients, I'd go and spend a day and do 2 weeks worth of work that I hadn't been able to do because they couldn't meet me in that sort of time.
Yeah.
And then when you come into that one specific time, you spend a day, you've got to the exact point you've been trying to get to for 2 or 3 weeks, and it's just, I don't get why they do it as much as they do.
But that's why in this context in Africa, it was crucial to be there. This couldn't be done at all from a distance. We really had to fly there and be close to the entrepreneurs. Because you need to observe, you need to see how things are working at the school, or the issues the restaurant had.
You said you did prior research. Obviously, you went to see, I imagine, people from relatively similar areas, so you could understand the concept from them. And you were saying about planning it prior. So did you plan the flights, where you go and how you commute and all that sort of thing as well?
Because yes, we did. We were responsible for preparing, and that was exciting as well. Preparing the whole experience, all the research we did, from talking to people, random people that we knew had worked or lived in Africa, to learn from them, to reading as much as possible. But that's the thing. There are a lot of things you may read a lot, but there are a lot of things you can never predict. Only once you're there, you see it with your eyes, right? And then we looked at even more in terms of the project, the work itself, in terms of design. We looked at plenty of methods and exercises like SWOT analysis and value proposition canvas, things like that. So we had everything prepared in case we needed it there. So it was a lot of preparation. It was around a month before we flew there, I think.
Another question? Last one, Tom?
Last one?
Yeah, otherwise we stay here forever.
You mentioned engaging with like WhatsApp groups. How did you go about doing that with the companies that you're set out to work with?
Sorry, can you repeat the
You
question?
mentioned working, it was like WhatsApp groups. You said something about using WhatsApp groups as
Yeah.
a means of social media. How did that pan out in terms of the two companies you worked with? How did you roll that out in a sense?
So that was used for the school because the restaurant didn't have that need. They were already quite good at communicating the brand on social media. The owner, Malik, was well connected in Rwanda, so he was doing a good job on that one, not so much the school. So we took advantage of the fact that social media is huge in Africa, and the way they use WhatsApp, again, is very different. So we found out in conversations when we were interviewing people that they had different groups for everything you can imagine, from golf to moms in Kigali, expats, parents. And people share a lot of information about, in our case, schools. They start advertising summer camps in May. So it's really important for a business to have that presence. And we created a few small flyers, digital flyers to share on WhatsApp. And that's how 10 new families enrolled after a week, which is crazy.
It's very interesting to see, to understand the cultures, because from my experience from Africa is that, or India even, there's so much happening in the developing countries throughout the mobile technology that we have no idea in Western countries, like how much money exchange or banking to their phone, or as you say, advertising to the WhatsApp, that perhaps it would make us feel a bit behind with that kind of
In a way,
information.
yes.
Yeah. So you might be, progressed in other areas, but when it comes to this social media and internet, despite the fact the internet is not as powerful here, yeah, there's like this. It's amazing. It's amazing.
It depends on the country. In Kenya, I heard this quite good. I was in Kenya as well, but I didn't get that experience. But I think in certain parts of Kenya, it can be really fast, the internet, so it depends where you are.
Amazing. Great. All right, Teresa, thank you very much for
Thank you.